Let's get started. So today's video is called victim shaming, victim blaming, victim framing, and victim naming. And all of these aiming words are trying to point out how we deal with the idea, the word, and I guess sometimes identity of people being victims. What sparked this video was someone who I know was a former Brown Trump supporter, posted a video, and I think he's changed his mind over time, but he posted um, the image of Barack and Michelle Obama being depicted as apes in the Donald Trump truth thing that he posted. And he posted and asked, why did Trump do this? And then someone in his comments section, which is a person of color, of ethnic ambiguity, they look black, but I'm not 100% sure. They commented, and basically they went in on President Obama and Michelle Obama and black people, even though that person seemed to be black and is definitely a darker person of color, went in on black people and Jewish people, and said they were in competition to be the biggest victims. And then the person said a couple other crazy things. And I felt myself feeling some kind of way because what I've observed in this society is that a lot of people use words, and I'm not sure they know what those words mean. Now, the way I think this person intended to use the word victim, I think she was trying to say that if anybody says, you know, look what happened to me, then they're playing the victim. And if they're playing the victim, then that's a bad thing because they should pick themselves up by their bootstraps and yada, 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 whatever BS that person was trying to communicate. But I think it's worth exploring what a victim actually is. And by textbook definition, a victim is a person that is harmed or killed by an accident, some kind of event, maybe a crime or something to that effect. So there's a perpetrator of an offense of some sort, whether intentional or accidental. And then the person harmed or killed is a victim. It's pretty straightforward. So we should be able to very clearly see who's a victim and who's not. But we live in a society where people want to use victimhood as a currency. And some of the people who want to use victimhood as a currency are not victims. And so those people who aren't victims, who want to use victimhood as a currency, then try to manipulate the language, manipulate the idea of what a victim is because they want to be able to use that currency in a certain way. Let's look at it's hard to call this thing a person, the person that killed Renee Good, right? So this person, who his last name was Ross, wants to play the victim. He was not a victim whatsoever. He was a perpetrator. Renee Good was the victim. He did a crime. She was killed by that crime. Thus, he was the perpetrator and she was the victim. But by trying to use victimhood as a currency, now people who say, they're on the side of Renee Good, who have a valid claim that she's a victim, whereas Thing Ross, who does not have a valid claim, wants to shift the narrative to create the conditions where he can get victimhood currency. And then people who align themselves with that can then take victimhood currency and then try to use that currency in exchange for control of the narrative. And so he tries to position himself as, oh, I was in danger of getting tapped by her vehicle. So of course I had to take my gun and shoot her 3 times. I would call him something else than a victim. Rhymes with, never mind, I'm not going to go there. At any rate, so he's trying to play the victim, right? So by trying to play this role, now he's trying to get sympathy and validation and justification for the choice that he made. But he's not the victim. Renee Good is, her kids are, her spouse is, her family, her community, they are all, connected to the fact that she's a victim, and then they have secondary victimhood because they have been harmed by this guy's perpetration of a crime. That's it. He perpetrated a crime. That's it. It's that simple. But because of the way we deal with our society, now you see people, like, if a person who's actually a victim says they're a victim, then the people want to downplay the actual victim, the person that actually harmed, downplay it, and then shift the narrative. And too many of us let that happen. Now, another phenomenon is that there's this false narrative that some white people, trying to be really detailed with how I describe this, cannot be victims, right? And they want to be able to use the currency of victimhood at the same time. So, like the people in the Epstein files, right? These guys who are in the Epstein files have all committed crimes. They are the perpetrators. And the people on the other end of the crimes that they perpetrated are the victims, very clearly. But because of the way they twist the narrative, they make it that if it comes out that they did the things that they did and that they get punished for the things that they did, now that hurts them because they come from a mindset of, I can do whatever I want and no one can do anything to me. And if anybody makes me pay the consequences of my actions, I now am a victim because I am beyond being able to be a victim in a certain sense, right? I'm trying to make this clear. It may not be abundantly clear, but what I'm trying to say is there's some people who see themselves as they are conquerors. For them to be victimized is a crime. But if they ever had to pay the consequences of the crimes that they perpetrate, now they become the victims. Does that make sense? It shouldn't make sense because it's insane. But many people function this way. And so you've seen people, like a person will be a bully, right? They'll be abusing somebody. Then they're the perpetrator. The person they're abusing is the victim. But then the victim says, yo, I'm done with this. And they somehow, some way get this person, whether it's through the judicial system or just snapping and hitting them in the face with a boat or whatever it is, they get them. Now that person is like, poor me. I'm the victim now. I'm hurt. Have mercy on me. I'm a poor victim. We got to start making things mean what they mean, using the definitions for what they are. If you harm or hurt somebody or murder somebody or kill somebody by a crime or a thing that you perpetrated, that person's the victim and you are what you are. But because of the kind of confusion that we have going on in our society, now we have some insane people who are actually victims who think being a victim is somehow a mark against them. So they don't want to be a victim. So because they don't want to be a victim, even though they are victim by textbook definition, they will then push away the notion that they have been victimized, people who have been legitimately victimized. And then they will side on the perpetrator of the violence because they just don't want to be associated with victimhood. But what it is an insane way of psychologically distancing themselves from being a victim. So you get these, like, Candace Owens type people or other people who historically their people have been victimized. Crimes have been done against them. They have been victimized. Now, just because you've been victimized doesn't mean your whole identity is a victim. You're going to be a victim for all your life. But we have to be able to name when someone has acted in a criminal way, in a harmful way towards you, so that it can be acknowledged and stopped and justice can actually take place. And then being identified as a victim, that's a completely different thing. But you should be able to name it. You should be able to name the thing that's happened to you. Because if you name it, now it doesn't have power over you anymore. If you don't allow things to be named, those things have power over you. So now, if something happens to me, like say somebody scams me, I'm now a victim of a scam. Now, do I mean does that mean that becomes my total identity? Absolutely not. But I have to acknowledge it so that I can then seek justice for the crime that's been perpetrated against me. So we got to stop making this idea that being a victim is somehow the fault of the person that has been victimized. They're not. But what happens is our society is we shame people who've been victimized. We blame people who've been victimized. And sometimes we frame people who've been victimized. And then those people, because of that, framework that we've set up in our society, they try to distance themselves from that. And then they try to distance themselves from the shame. And then injustice continues for way longer than it has to. And so I hope that in listening to this, that if you've ever been victimized or if you're currently being victimized, that you realize that that's not something that is your fault. It's not something that you should be ashamed of. The person who perpetrated the crimes should be ashamed. Donald Trump, sorry, that piece of person, thing, whatever it is, should be ashamed of everything about itself because of the things that it's done. It isn't because it can't be because whatever its issue is, but it has victimized repeatedly, 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 and then shamed, blamed, and framed the victims so that some of them do not want to name that that's what's happened. And many of the people who have supported people like this thing have also fallen victim again because now they have allowed the shame and the blame and the framing of them to keep themselves from saying how they've been harmed. And so justice is delayed more and more and more. And it just keeps spreading like a toxic disease. And I understand what it's like to not want to be a victim. I have been through, if I'm telling you, I don't even really talk about it much, but the level of different layers of abuse that this particular body has been through is more than many people I know. And I know what it's like to get taught, pick yourself up by your bootstraps and all of the crap. I know what it's like to have toxic masculinity and all the other stuff that tries to tell you that you can't name what you've experienced. However, I've also allowed myself to name what I've experienced, and then I've been able to do something about it. And that's the thing that we need to learn. If we can't name it, we can't do anything about it. And it just keeps happening to the next person, the next person, next person. And unfortunately, when we don't name what we've experienced and we don't kind of allow ourselves to be healed or redeemed or whatever the case may be, it just sets the stage for somebody else to go through it. And now we have inadvertently, by not naming or warning or whatever the case may be, we've become an extension of the perpetrator. And that's what I've seen happen time and time again. Like this person who wrote this thing against the Obamas and blah, blah, blah. And I'm not saying you got to think the Obamas are the greatest. I'm not saying you got to think that they're anything. But what Trump did with that guerrilla video, knowing the history, excuse me, that is blatantly racist. And for someone to then be a person of color or a black person, whatever the heck they were, to then come out against the Obamas and put them down when I don't even know if the Obamas have even acknowledged it, but just the fact that this person of color can just be like, oh, well, they're a victim and all this other things like that. They're doing that because they're trying to distance themselves from the shame and blaming and framing of being a victim themselves. You can't be a person of color in this country or black in this country and not in some way be connected to the perpetration of crimes because crimes have been perpetrated against people of color since this country has existed, and poor white people and other people who came into this country before they got accepted by white people, because this country has always been what it is. But because we can't name it, it keeps doing what it's been doing. And now it's spreading. So if you get anything out of this video, understand that if you do not name it, it will control you. If something has happened to you and you can't name it, then you become an extension of the perpetration of those crimes. So it's not to blame you or shame you or anything like that. I'm just telling you that functionally, that's what happens, you know? So name it, don't take the blame, don't take the shame, and don't allow yourself to be framed. But acknowledge what it is, name it for what it is, and then people are going to have to change. But we can't do that if people don't call things what they are. So that's pretty much all I have for this video. I hope that it connects with some people. If there are questions about what I meant, leave them in the comments and I'll write them out and explain it before a little bit more. I know it's a lot of rhyming words, which wasn't exactly what I was going for initially, but then I was like, it rhymes. But most importantly, I want you to love yourself. I want to encourage people, invite people to care for themselves, to know that they are worthy of being treated well, that they're worthy of being loved, that they are of infinite worth and value. Even people that I have a hard time dealing with on some level, I know that they probably were a victim and never were able to name it. And so then they became a perpetrator. That happens a lot. A lot of times people graduate from being a victim to becoming a perpetrator. And I use that word graduate very loosely. I think that person who was both a woman and a person of color / black, because like I said, she looked black, but her last name was interesting. But at any rate, that person is becoming a perpetrator by distancing herself from being a victim. And you shouldn't wear victimhood as a badge of honor either, but you don't want to use perpetrator as a badge of honor because that's definitely not it. I think that more than anything, it's just looking at it as a textbook definition that describes something in particular, being able to clearly identify what category the thing falls under, and then taking the appropriate action to change the story in a way that makes you better or helps you to heal or otherwise comforts you if you're on the victim side. And if you find that you're a perpetrator, whether you intended to be or not, maybe you extended your own victimhood. Because most of the time bullies are people who've been bullied, and people who've had harm done to them tend to become the people who do harm to other people because of power or the illusion of power. And what I am trying to invite you into the awareness of is that no matter what someone tries to do to you, if you can name it and then actually know that you don't deserve the things that have been done to you, and you re-access the power, because a lot of people say that someone took their power away. Well, I'm trying to invite you to remember that your power is always with you, and that even by naming something, that's a connection to your power. And that when you have the power, when you restore your power, then you can change things. And it doesn't matter who you are, where you are, whether it's big thing or a small thing, you have it within you, but you have to start by naming things as they are. So I would have liked this to be a more exciting video or more animated video or something that's like catchy and trendy and all of the other stuff, but it isn't. It is what it is, but it is instructive. It is an invitation. I do believe in you, and I hope that it speaks to you. And for those of you who disagree with my estimation of Trump, the perpetrator, I do feel sorry for him on some level, because I keep thinking, what happened to this man to make him such a horrible example of being a human? And in some ways, there's at some point in history, I assume some people will be grateful for him, like pulling the curtain and showing people that things are what they really are instead of being what we pretend they are. So there's that. Anyway, blessings, peace. I do indeed hope you get something from this, and let me know if I can be of service.